Good morning. Good to see everybody this morning. Do we have any other announcements other than what we have here? We have a couple of updates, but do remember Miss Pat? I asked if she was behaving, and Sonny said that's their problem. And the reality is, we know the answer to that. But anyway, oh, that was a great answer. Remember the others. Anything else? Do remember, stay and eat. You say, well, I didn't bring anything. That's all right. Suzanne fixed enough for you too. So stay and eat with us this morning. Because I assure you, she did fix enough. And there are others that fixed enough too. So I hope you'll stay and eat with us and have fellowship. Short devotional, and then we will not have 6 o'clock service. Next week we have a visiting speaker, and then the week after that, the second Sunday of July, we will finish up this series of conversations of Jesus. And so then we're going to start on the book of Romans. And so if you want to get a quick start, and I'm not going to try to bog down in Romans. I could do that. Have done it. But what I'm hoping to do is give you kind of an overview. And so I'm not guaranteeing this, but we'll take like a chapter a week. So it won't be like, say, bogged down. It'll be more of an overview. So you'll kind of have to at least read before you come so that you know kind of what's going on. And anyway, get the gist of it and get the gist of what's going on. There's a whole lot in Romans. It's a wonderful book, but it's very technical in the first 11 chapters. Yet you say, well, it's not that technical. Well, yeah, you got to know some things, which I know you do. That's why we're not going to try to get bogged down in it. And we're going to try to move through kind of in a summary type situation. If you're interested on Wednesday nights, we're going to start studying here in a few weeks, Minor Prophets. And we've got a couple more weeks, or at least one more week. I'm thinking we'll just finish up our series on what God can't do this Wednesday night, and then we will start in July. Well, it will be July, but we'll start the second Wednesday of July in Minor Prophets, and I'll tell you Wednesday night what we're going to study. Anyway, John 11 is where we are today. Conversations with Jesus. This is conversation between Mary and Martha and Jesus. When you look in the Bible, you find 5 different Marys. You find Mary, the mother of Jesus. You find Mary, the mother of John Mark. Then you also find Mary Magdalene, and you find Mary, the wife of Cleophas. Then you find Mary, the sister of Lazarus. And that's the Mary that's in this discussion. This is the same Mary and Martha that's found, and if we have time, which I don't think we will, but if we have time, we'll look in Luke chapter 10. And in Luke chapter 10, you know, that discussion about serving and what's important, and Jesus talking about she's chosen the good part. That's that Mary and Martha. That's this same Mary and Martha. In beginning in chapter 11, we're going to begin in verse 1. It says, a certain man was sick, Lazarus. The name Lazarus means God is my help. Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Now, let me put this in a little bit broader context. John 11 is right at the last week of the life of Christ. Matter of fact, John 12 is the beginning of John's discussion of the last week of the life of Christ. And so Jesus is getting going to get to Bethany. And if you think about it as you read, I think you see it better in John than you do, say, Matthew. But that last week, Jesus is literally traveling from Bethany to Jerusalem. And Bethany to Jerusalem is about 2 miles. So Jesus stayed kind of out of Jerusalem proper, but he wasn't that far away. But we got to get him to Bethany. And this is the story that John tells us that ultimately gets Jesus there. Because Jesus was not around. I'll show that in just a second. But anyway, Lazarus is sick. It was, verse 2, it was Mary, that Mary, who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Now, to find more about that, go into the 12th chapter of the book of John. And we'll not look at that, but that, if you want to read sort of ahead, so to speak, while we're studying this, that's that incident. And you might say, well, wait a minute, how? Well, remember, how would he kind of project? And he didn't project. Remember, John wrote this anywhere from 70 to 90 AD, long time after it happened. John is trying to get us to understand who this Mary is. She's the one that anointed the feet of Jesus. Therefore, the sisters, who's the sisters? Mary and Martha, sent to him saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. They sent for Jesus. Jesus is about 30 miles away from Bethany. Jesus is just a little over a day's journey. A day's journey, really a day and a half. A day's journey was about 20 miles, considered about 20 miles. And so when they talk about, in Bible times, they talk about a day's journey, it's about 20 miles, give or take. Jesus is around 30 miles, depending upon who you look at and the geography and the direction, the way that he takes. Some have said about 25 miles. He was more than a day's journey. That's the whole story of it. It is interesting to note something. Lord, behold he whom you love. This word's going to appear in this immediate context a couple of times. Not the same Greek word. The word that's used here with regards to Lazarus is phileo. Now, through the years, I think about this not long ago, but through the years, we've probably made too much of it. In other words, when we talk about phileo, we're talking about brotherly love. When we talk about agape or agapao love, we're talking about that deep love. There is a sense in which that is true. But there's also, like I say, it's something that we can carry too far to an extreme. But there is sort of an interesting thought here, and I'll show you in just a minute. But just hold to your thinking with regards to the sisters tell Jesus concerning Lazarus, Lord, behold, he whom you love, phileo, is sick. Jesus heard that, and he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of Man may be glorified through it. Now, think for a minute. Put yourself, whoever you are, male or female, put yourself in the position of being either Mary or Martha or both. You're a sister. You've come to tell one that you evidently believe can do something about your situation, your problem. The one that you love. Now, if you go back and you look in verse 3, one of the things that they say is Lord. Once again, don't read too much into that. It's possible that we would take it, Lord Jesus. But also there were times in which you would recognize one, maybe give them a little bit, and you would recognize them as Lord. And so we don't really know how they meant it, but let's take it from the idea that they took it as Jesus as Lord because they've come to him to help remedy the situation with regards to their brother. She anointed the feet of Jesus. They love Jesus. They are folks that evidently are followers of Jesus. And she says, he's sick, but Jesus said this sickness is not unto death. It's not that he's not going to die, he dies. Jesus is saying we're the power of God in all of this. We're going to show God this is not a bad thing. Now, sitting in the hospital room, he comes in, and let's say you're not in the bed, you're a loved one of the person that's in the bed, but the doctor comes in, the doctor says I want to give you your diagnosis. Here's your diagnosis, and you have 2 days to live. And then he says, but that's not all bad news. You don't think? That's what Jesus tells us. It's all going to work out. This is going to be for the glory of God. This is going to show his power. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And this is where the play on words of love is. Lord, the one whom you love, phileo. This one is agape or agapao love. Agape love, committed love, tender love, a love of conviction, of commitment. Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, so that when he heard, and think about verse 5. Think about verse 5. Now, I want you to think about something. Verse 5 is John, of course, by inspiration. I'm not denying inspiration, but John's by inspiration. That's the way he felt that Jesus felt towards Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. When you look at verse 3 and you see that it's seemingly John is quoting what was said. There's a little play there, but it's interesting. So that when he heard, he being Jesus, that he, Lazarus, was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Now, let's go back to the hospital scenario. Doctor's giving you 3 days to live, and he says, I'll come back in 2 days. You're not going to do anything within those 3 days. No, we're not going to do anything. You're going to find a new doctor quick. Jesus just sits there. Now, they've come to him, and I believe they've come to him with the full expectation that he can heal or raise, well, he's going to raise Lazarus, but heal Lazarus. They have come with that full expectation. And yet Jesus says, no, this is going to be for the glory of God. And he just sits there and twiddles his thumb. What in the world? Get up. Get going. Verse 7. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go into Judea again. Well, that's not going to always hit home. They'd kind of been run out in the first place. That's why he wasn't in Judea. Let's go. Let's go to Judea again. His disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you're going there again. That doesn't make sense, does it? That's like, let's go back there. Yeah, it's going to be a fight, but let's go back there. Heard me in my stories, but I got close one time years ago to, and that was an alcoholic. And he told me some of his stories while he was drinking. And he got in some bar fights. And, he said, this is how brilliant I was. He said, I'd get beat up, might get put in jail, or might just get run off that night. He said, I was back the next night. It's like, how stupid are you? and so I would hear his stories. Well, they're telling Jesus, hey, stone. This is not a good idea. But Jesus understood that this is where he needed to go back. Now, notice something else. Notice how his disciples refer to him. The word rabbi, an Aramaic term, means teacher. It can mean, and most times does mean master teacher, but anybody that really was a teacher of that day was considered master teacher because there weren't a whole lot of teachers then. They refer to Jesus as rabbi. It's interesting. The book of John is a wonderful, well, they're all wonderful, but it's a wonderful book because while it spends so much time talking about the miracles of Jesus and the power that Jesus had, matter of fact, John, the book of John, that's what it's centered upon. Matthew is more of the story. Luke is the detail. John is the emotional. It's the faith aspect, producing faith and strengthening faith. And it centers around 7 miracles. This being of them. But John often, in telling the story of Jesus, refers to Jesus as rabbi, more so than the others. It's the emphasis here on teacher, of course, but lately the Jews sought to stone you, so we want to go there again. Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. If I knew this, I had missed it somewhere. But there was a movement in ancient days to proclaim a day as 12 hours, not 24. And it was based upon this verse. Jesus said a day is 12 hours. He's more than likely talking about, because we read the context, he's more talking about, we got 12 hours of light. There's 12 hours in a day. And if anyone walks in the day, he's not stumble. Why? Because there's light. Sees light. Don't you? I tell you, I watch the DIY shows because I like them. I appreciate the skill of somebody that can take 2 somethings and make something out of it when they do it and do it right. And so I appreciate those DIY shows. And they always talk about, oh yes, we like this house because it has a lot of windows and it lets in natural light. How many of us are home during the day? Most people are activities, doing stuff. We're home very little during the day. And then it gets this season of the year, well, they tell you to close the blinds, close the shades, because we don't want to let the light in, let the heat in, right? So what good to do you? But I wouldn't want to have a house without windows. Jesus says, the light. They have light. They see the world. They see what's going on. They're able to do. But if anyone, verse 10, and he kind of makes an application. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light's not within him. Jesus is not talking literally about daylight and darkness. He's talking about walking with the Lord, not walking with the Lord. That's where these folks are confused. You see, Jesus is on a different level discussion-wise already. He's kind of interesting already. But Jesus is on a different level of discussion than what they're on. They're thinking about daylight. They're thinking about work. They're thinking about activities. And they're thinking about night. They didn't have street light because Ben Franklin was one of the predecessors for street lights. And so he hadn't been around yet. And so what little light you had, you might carry a lantern or a candle with you. That was not really that common either. But if you traveled at night, but it was something that was done from time to time. Jesus says folks don't walk in the night. Why? They stumble, they don't see. But he's talking about spiritually. Verse 11, these things he said, and after that he said to them, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. The word sleep is used some 18 times in the New Testament. 15 of those times it refers to death, being dead. Jesus tells his disciples, our friend Lazarus sleeps. He's telling them he's dead. Our friend Lazarus is dead, but I'm going to go and I'm going to wake him up. Now, this is an affirmation to those that are with him, with Jesus. This is an affirmation of things that they probably understood, but Jesus is trying to strengthen them. He's dead, but we're going to go, and I'm going to wake him up. The disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. Now they're sleeping. They're thinking about resting. You know, we rest. Our body rests when we sleep. Sleep is good for us. Sleep is healing in many ways. Their thought is, Jesus is talking about he's asleep. He's just sleeping. He's resting. He's getting well. And Jesus says, in verse 13, John says, however, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought he was speaking about him taking rest and sleep. Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Plain statement. Then Thomas, this would be Didymus, as in other accounts, but Thomas, who's called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. This is that comment that gets back to this idea of verse 8. Lord, what? We're going back to Judea? No, they ran you out. They said, if you come back, they're going to stone you. And Jesus says, we're going. And so Thomas just says, well, let's also go with them that we may die with him. You wonder about his faith, don't you? I'm not really questioning it because I don't know. We don't know enough about him, really. But we do appreciate his commitment, because his commitment is, well, you know, if Jesus is going, we're going to go with him, and we may suffer the same fate as he, but we'll suffer it. And so let's go. Anything anybody wants to say, because the conversation gets good now. Sure. I don't know. Could have been both, like what you said. Yeah. Yeah, text just doesn't tell us, give us enough clues to tell us. But yeah, very, very true. It's almost one of those that doesn't matter, but it is an interest, and you wonder. And so for me, it's whichever way you come up with, I think is fine, because you don't destroy the text. Anything else? Or any comment on that? Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else? That's good. Excellent. Okay. So, verse 17. It's not right. Yeah, it is. Okay. Verse 17. So when Jesus came, he found that he'd already been in the tomb 4 days. Now, let's think about this. I try to, in study, I try to read. Of course, I have through the years. I did my for my master's, my internship was on the book of John. So I have studied this book in depth, not just on the surface. And what that's why I guess I love it so much. But anyway, you think about being dead 4 days. Now, in reading and in studying, there are those that try to discount miracles in the Bible. It's interesting. You ever heard of a fellow by the name of William Barclay, who wrote a series of commentaries actually on the whole Bible? And they are wonderful. They have great devotional thoughts. They have historical thoughts. For whatever reason, Barclay didn't believe in the miracles of Jesus. If you say, well, I'd like to read some of his stuff, we'll go to the best place to go is go to McKay's. McKay's somebody's always turned in. There's always several Barclay commentaries on different books of the Bible. They're small. Most of them are about $4 a piece now if you buy them up there, and that would be actually the place to buy them. But Barclay didn't believe in miracles. He was one of many. He's not just the only one. He's one of many. But I was reading Barclay was why I bring him up. Barclay talked about how that it was believed that Lazarus really was not dead, that he was just asleep, that he slept through 4 days. The reason Jesus lingered was to show the power of God, that he was dead. And they would have known that he was dead, that he had been dead for 4 days. They would have known. Now, it is true, it is true, biblical times, they didn't embalm. And if you don't embalm within a quick period of time, I know in the state of Tennessee, you don't have to be embalmed, but it's changed. It may have changed. But they don't embalm babies. Their veins are too small. And I have, unfortunately, sadly, I have preached more than I care to funerals for babies. And every undertaker that I've talked to, every funeral director that I've ever talked to, maybe would have a little casket for the child and would open it up for viewing for the next day and talk about, we got to hurry up and get him smelled. Deterioration does not take long. It takes longer than that for adults, but it doesn't take long. In Israel, in Bible times, you died, they pretty much buried you within the hour, if not the next few hours. They buried you quick. Decomposition, beginning to deteriorate. There are those that claim this miracle didn't happen. Miracles didn't happen themselves, but this miracle didn't happen. And so there are those that say, well, because if he'd been dead for 4 days, the deterioration had been such. But don't discount the power of God. And don't discount the power of the Lord. I believe the Lord did this miracle. And I think you do too, or you wouldn't be here this morning. But as we look at it, Jesus travels. Now from Bethany, he was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles. And many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Fellowship. One of the great blessings of being a child of God, being a Christian, is the wonderful opportunity to come together Sundays and Wednesdays and at other times and to enjoy the fellowship, the strengthening of the bond that exists there, and to strengthen that bond, to build each other up, to encourage each other. And you might say, well, we don't walk around and say, well, how was your week? And you did what? And it was terrible. No, it's just the idea of being together. It's the idea of telling stories, telling what happened maybe last week or last month or last year, sharing in one another's lives. Now, there are times in which you have to put or must put your arm around folks and say, been praying for you, and then they pour out their heart. And that's all right. Folks need to pour out their heart, and we need to, if we can, and we can't always, because sometimes our mental health is not great either. But if we can, we need to listen to them. My wife is a wonderful listener, by the way. If you ever need to avail yourself of one, I try to be. But my wife has some friends, they call her up, and I know what's going on, because, if you walk in the room, you can hear. And it's just like my wife just sits there and listens. And what a great blessing, great servant that is. Mary and Martha are comforted by the family that gathers, the church family, if you will, the neighbors that gather. the fellowship that's there. Martha, verse 20, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was sitting in the house. Sound familiar? Now Martha said to Jesus, look, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Doesn't that seem like a typical human response? If you'd have been here, it wouldn't have happened, but I know whatever you're going to do is right. In other words, make up your mind, woman. It's a faith, but it's a faith based in reality, isn't it? The first part is the reality. If you'd been here, it wouldn't have died. That shows her faith, her statement. But then she says, whatever you're going to be, whatever you're going to do, it's going to be right. It's going to be what needs to be done. I know that you're going to ask of God. God's going to give it to you. So it shows her faith. She has a good faith, strong faith. Jesus said unto her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection of the last day. See, this shows her faith. She believes Jesus. Jesus talked about a resurrection. A resurrection that there were those that had experienced before, not like Jesus. Think about some of the resurrections in the Bible. You always have to have what? Somebody that brings you forth, right? Jesus, we don't have that. He brought, if you will, brought himself forth. She understands that Jesus is talking about a resurrection, but she's thinking, once again, we get that level of, he's speaking on this level, she's up here, or vice versa. And she's thinking about the resurrection to come, the judgment. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? I want you to see how powerful Jesus' statement is, but I realized that I skipped over something that I wanted to make a point of in verse 24. So let's go back. I know that he will rise again. This is Martha's answer to Jesus in the resurrection at the last day. The Bible only talks about one resurrection. On the day of judgment, only one resurrection. The premillennialist will tell you there's two. The Bible doesn't talk about two. The Bible talks about one. She understands it, and she understands the day of judgment coming to the Lord. The dead will rise. Now, Jesus answers, having said that, now Jesus says to her in verse 25, I'm the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? He talks about the physical and the spiritual. Think about what he says. I'm the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. Whoever lives. He's talking about spiritual. As he talks about spiritual, he says, I'm the resurrection and the life. I'm the one that gives ultimate life. As Christians, we live in hope. I have my own project of things going on that's just for me. In other words, I do it at night. If I get a thought about it, I may jot it down in the office, but it's just something I do at night and weekends and so forth. It's something for me. I'll reveal it in the future sometime, maybe. But some insight here that is astounding. Life beats us down. Life turns on us. There are hard days, hard weeks, hard months, and hard years. And I think all of us that live any number of days can tell you that's true. Sometimes there's hard minutes, hard weeks, hard months, hard years. And we have those experiences in our life. But we continue to push forward. And we continue to push forward because of the hope that's set before us. The hope that is set before us, of course, as Christians, is eternal life, heaven, being with the Lord. Jesus is trying to present that. by saying, look, when we die, we don't die. We do die, but we don't die. When we die, the physical dies, but it is the spiritual that lives on. Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Now, here's the play on words here. The Bible talks about death, it talks about physical death, and then it talks about spiritual death. I know that God knew this when he revealed this. But this is very confusing for a lot of folks. Because when we begin to read the Bible, we have to understand the text and the context. This verse or those 2 or 3 verses say, but what's being said before it and after it, the context. And then we have to put it within the context of all the Bible. When we talk about dying, we understand physical death. Hebrews chapter 27 is pointing men wants to die after this the judgment. It's that part that Solomon talked about in Ecclesiastes 12, verse 7, that the body returns to the dust of the earth and soul to God that gave it. There is a physical death. We take our last breath and this body is no more. We've died physically. There's what the Bible calls spiritual death. This is where I think for a lot of folks it gets confusing, because there are those that believe that death that we would think of spiritually, in other words, where Jesus says, if you don't believe in me, you're going to die, that's extinction. You're done away with. In other words, if you die and you're not righteous and you don't get to go to heaven, then you're finished. You're through. You're no more. Is hell. The Bible teaches that there is a hell, the reality of hell, eternal punishment. It teaches that. That's a reality. The light is that is, as the Bible portrays it, and John portrays it in the book of Revelation, that is spiritual death, but it is not the end kaput, finished cessation of all things. But he likens the eternal damnation unto death. And so go back and think about what he says. You believe in me, though you may die physically, you'll live. You'll live spiritually. But those that do not believe, no, there's death for them. So she says, Lord, I believe that you're the Christ. This is a strong statement. And I think at least if we're reading this story, and there's nothing wrong with this way of study, but if we're reading this story and we don't really stop to meditate upon it and think about it, this statement does not get the strength that it is intended. Because here's her statement. Yes, Lord. Curios. Yes, Lord. Master. I believe that you are the Christ. Well, Christ simply means the anointed one. Remember, his name is Jesus. Christ is a title. Can we call him Christ? Yes. Yes, you can call him that. Because it literally means the anointed one. Not just from a standpoint of what is going to be done later on, but the idea of being anointed is the idea of being chosen and selected by God. You are God's special one. You have been anointed by God. The Son of God. This is strong. She's saying, I believe that you're the Christ. You're the Son of God. You're the one that we've looked for. You're the one that the prophet said would come. You're the one that is going to be the Savior of the world, and who is to come into the world. You're the one who was supposed to come. It's a statement of faith. It's a declaration not of only of faith, but explaining exactly to us, even today, who Jesus is. Anything I want to say? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But the thing is she has already understood that for 4 days. But he's been gone for 4 days. Oh, well, I would assume that she's been in and out of that room, so to speak. Um, 4 days, you know it, I know it, because we've gone through the grief process. That wound is still very much open and hurting. So I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah. And I don't mean this disparagingly, but even today, when Israel grieves, Israel grieves. It's very public. It's very open. Now, like I say, I don't mean that disrespectfully. Everybody grieves their own way. I had a lady that really, she had lost several members, and she did not grieve openly. I talked to her a lot. I knew her grief because I talked to her a lot being a preacher, but she did not show that. And there were some folks that would come to me, she's not grieving. She's got to do this. No, she's grieving in her own way. Leave her alone. Leave her alone. Absolutely. Each of us are different. But yeah, the wound, whatever how she feels from an external standpoint, the wound is very deep because it's been dead long. So I agree with you. Yeah, agree with exactly what you're saying. Anything else? And when she had said these things, verse 28, she went away and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, "The teacher has come and is calling for you." Kind of an invitation as such, almost. As soon as she heard that, she arose quickly, came to him. Now Jesus had not come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly and went out, followed her, saying, "She's going to the tomb to weep there." Because, like I say, remember, buried them quickly. She's going. I still believe that, like I say, I mean, I've gone through grief, gone through it with, I don't know how many people, studied it, gone through it myself. It's an open wound. It's an open wound for 2 years. It's very much an open wound. After that, it's still a wound. You know, I mean that it's gone. Folks, when folks hear me say that and they say, "Oh, no, it's still a wound, still a wound," and it's still there are times when it gets ripped wide open, but it's manageable. She hears, she says, but the folks saying, "Well, she's going to the tomb to weep." Then when Mary came where Jesus was, saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Well, we've heard that before. Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. He said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said, "Lord, come and see." Another invitation. Jesus saw her weeping. The Jews came with her weeping, and he groaned in the spirit. He's troubled. What's he troubled about? Is he troubled that his friend has died? I think that's part of it. Is he troubled that they don't understand? That could be. I'm not real sure. I think personally, my own feeling, Paul Darty's feeling, so you take it for what it's worth, is one beloved preacher we know says there's always a waste can there. You can throw it away. But that is that Jesus groaned in his spirit because his friend, what they're going through. It's an empathetic sympathy. What's Mary and Martha going through? Yeah, yeah. I think Brother Gaian Woods makes that in his commentary on John. I think that's a statement he makes too. I'm not saying that, but yeah, that's true. How true that is. But he groans. Good point. Anything else? I love the invitations here. Come and see how he loved him. Lord, come and see. And some of them said, come not, or said to them, could not this man who opened the eyes of the blind also have kept this man from dying? Well, there were resurrections, right? There was Elijah. Elisha was resurrected. Jesus, remember, the widow of Nain, Jairus' the little daughter. Jesus rose, but they didn't catch this. Let me run through this very quickly. Then Jesus, again groaning in himself, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench. He's been dead for 4 days. Now, we've caught all that because we've already set all that up. Remember stones. Remember burial was different. You didn't dig a hole in the ground and lower them down to the ground. You kind of dug a hole in a cave, really, and laid them in there. Stones covered it up. Lord, he's dead. He's dead. He's dead. He can't be any more dead. Jesus said to her, did not I say unto you that if you would believe, you'd see the glory of God? You're going to see the power of God. They took away the stone from the place where the dead man was laying. Jesus lifted up his eyes, said, Father, I thank you that you've heard me, and I know that you will always hear me. But because of the people who are standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. That's a powerful statement. His prayer is interesting, isn't it? Because his prayer is to God, but it seemingly is directed to folks. You ever heard a public prayer that when it was finished, you didn't lead it, somebody else led it, but when it was finished, you felt like they were talking to somebody in the audience and not really talking to God? I had a man one time lead prayer, and I'm really convinced that he was talking to his son, because his son had multiple affairs on his wife, and this man, as he led this closing prayer one Sunday morning, he was talking about when you go to work tomorrow and you see this woman and you think she's beautiful, and I'm thinking, this is not a prayer. This is sermon part 2, and I still believe that. I think this man has passed away. His son is considerably older now, but it's like, you wonder, Jesus, now I'm not saying his prayer is not genuine. I'm not saying this is not, but notice that John even says, well, he said it so that people, and he says, Lord, I said this so that people hear, that they believe, that they might see, they might understand. Now, when he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. I like what Brother Marshall Keeble used to say. The reason he called Lazarus to come forth was that if he had just said come forth, everybody that's in the cemetery would have come out of the grave. Brother Marshall Keeble used to say that. That's always a good point. And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to him, loose him and let him go. Jesus raised him from the dead. The idea of being bound, don't think of mummies. That was Egypt's way of doing things. This is more of the idea that there were clothes of which they were wrapped in his body, but not a mummy type situation. Face cloth, the idea of a cloth on his face. They did that. They would put a special cloth on his face. Remember when it talks about the grave clothes of Jesus, it talks about I think it's Luke that says the face cloth was folded and was off to the side. I think they did that. I don't know. I've never really read why, but I think they did that so that when you ever walked into a grave to see that would be awful, but they covered the face. It's the resurrection of Jesus. Or the resurrection of Lazarus. That's the whole conversation. And there is further conversation within this, in verse 28. It's beautiful. And I'll just let you go on and read that. But it carries us to a point through verse 44, where he comes up out of the grave, as we've talked about. And then Jesus applies and begins to talk about, and John really talks about the plot to kill Jesus. So it kind of switches there. But it's a beautiful story. Anything else? I hear the natives back there. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this day, your word. Thankful to see the faith of these ladies, but thankful also to see the power of God in this miracle. And thankful for the fact that it was done to show those not only of that day, but those of us today, of your great power and your your endless love for all of us. We ask that you watch over us, that you bless us, that you keep us, that you hold us as we hold to you. This is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Y'all have a great, great week.